We'd like to give a special thank you to Pure Project for hosting the Society of Barley Engineers. Thank you.
And apparently they said, no, nobody has said anything, so it looks like it's you. So I got volunteered for it, ironically enough. So we're going to get into it, and I've actually discovered this, one of the beers I'm going to be letting you all try tonight, / one of the ones I made, is actually a brand new style that I had never heard of or had before my entire life, and this is my first time ever really trying it. And it is a very, very unique style, so we're going to go through that style as well, and we'll get into it. And I learned about it through the Brewlosophy podcast. They actually have a full video on that, so if you see any of the stuff that I'm going through seems familiar, it's because they did a episode on the Brewlosophy podcast on this. So we're going to get into the Keptinis is the name of the style of beer. That's the first style of beer. It is a Lithuanian style of beer. Well, kind of. I mean by well, kind of, because I took a couple liberties in the way I did it. I made mine a little different than what they did. But it is a Lithuanian style beer where the mash is baked in an oven. Unlike a traditional, mash that we would do with our grains, this is actually baked in the oven, and then it's supposed to be a raw ale where you do not boil the beer. You bring the beer up to about 175, 180 degrees Fahrenheit to basically pasteurize the beer as best as you can and then bringing it back down. Well, I did not want to risk getting everyone here at the Brew Club sick, so I decided to boil mine just because maybe at another date when I want to try it on my own, I'll do the raw version of it, but I did not feel comfortable making everyone have food poisoning. So, what's that? Temperature, they usually bring it up to about 100. The temperature, they bring it up to about 175, 180 for pasteurization, and then they bring it down. So it should be fine, but I did not want to take the chance of basically causing everyone to be ill. But the good news is the malt bill is very, very simple, and we'll get into that in a minute. So the idea is, how strange is this type of ale? Well, it is a dark beer, but it is made with using only pale malts. So most of the time they use pale malts in it, and normally Pilsner malts are used. But in normal beer, as we all know, the color comes from the drying of the malts and higher temperatures. We all got to see that if you were there at the Admiral Malting's presentation where they talked about where they did the floor malting and how they kiln the malts longer periods of time would cause darker colors and crystal malts and so on and so forth. We all are well versed in that area, but this is kind of, the heat makes the starch and the protein in the malts go through the Maillard reactions, causing the caramelization in some of the malts that we use in some of our darker beers, ambers, and so on and so forth. Well, that's actually a little bit different in this style. So due to the mash, it's actually being baked. So I'm going to ask if you could start passing it around. This is my version of it, and I'll get into what I did. But it's being baked. The Maillard reaction is a little different in the baking process. So you're not really boiling it, you're baking it, but we'll get into that in a second. And the reaction is that the heat's working because you're adding water to it. It's not just being dry baked, kilned like they do in the kilning process. Because there's the water added to it, it's actually creating more of a reaction on the primarily on the sugar and not so much the starch. So that's kind of the interesting thing. So the way you can think about it is it's almost like a super decoction, more or less. It's like a super decoction beer. And it's produced by baking the malts, unlike the flavor that can be produced by traditional malting. So we'll kind of go into, this is the kind of the stuff I got from the Lars website for the Milk the Funk. If any of you have seen some of his stuff, this is a traditional Lithuanian family brewery setup. This is like outside their farm, but this is like the way they do their setup. And they set up this whole kind of process of how they do it, and they actually have an oven inside this whole building, and this is where they kind of do a lot of the brewing and all that. And as you can see, it's quite rural, but this has been going on for a really, really long time, kind of like the whole Kvike beers. This is all similar region and all that, so it's kind of fun how they did all this. So this is Ignis and Valtatis. I guess that's how you say his name. They prepped the mash. So as you can see, it's the whole standardization. They're using an old wooden barrel that they actually different style of doing beer. But as I can say, you know, strange brews. I'm like, well, this is going to be fun. So, but there, as you can see, these gentlemen are mixing up the grain, the malt, and they're mixing it up with a very, very thick mash process. And so it's very low amount of water, and that's how they're kind of doing it to basically get it ready for the next process, which is where they bake it.
Are they milling the malt, or is that just coming straight out of the bag?
No, they've already milled the malt. So Andy asked the question is, are they milling the malt? No. So he's using a wooden stick, which is not exactly the most sterile way of, or sanitized way of doing it, but they're actually mixing the malt with the water to prep it before the next step in the mash. You'll see you can see inside the barrel there, the goal is for the mash to be wet, but not too wet. And we'll get into what I did in my process, and I'm gonna do it a little different next time I do this, but I feel like it turned out pretty nicely the way it, but it's definitely different. Definitely a strange brew. And so they're mixing it up in there, and they mix it up in the wooden barrel first, just to make sure that they have the mash at the right consistency before they get it ready for the oven. Now, the traditional style, I'm sorry, I don't have a wood-burning oven at home, so I was not able to do like they did, and apparently they do it at a lot warmer temperatures than I'd use, but this is how they did it. And so they'll take the mash. This is the thick, almost like thicker than porridge kind of mixture, and they'll put it in each one of these, you know, baking trays, and it'll get baked in the oven in order to get out some of those dark malt flavors. I unfortunately did not produce as dark of a color as what they did, but, you know, live and learn. They're using, I'll get into it in a second, the temperature that they're using is around 300 to 500 degrees Celsius. So that's what they said they used, was 300 to 500 degrees Celsius, which I was not about to test my smoke alarms in my home. But that was what I was worried about occurring in my home, so I was not as brave as these souls. But then again, you know, we all saw that it was all outside. So this is what their baked mash looks like. A little bit of burnt, a little bit of what have you there. You know, that's what the 300C does. So got a little crispy. But at the same time, when you look at how dark malt gets when we talk about like our stouts and so on and so forth, you're getting close to that same level of Lovabond, but that's what they do, and that's how they're making this style. It's really, really interesting how they do it, but because they're baking it for quite a long time, and I'll get into how long I baked mine in the next following slides, but they bake it for quite a long time. Sorry. So I feel like I should have Patrick Starr up here that says, okay, no, it's my turn. But this was me going at it. I didn't have as cool of baking trays as they had because I was like, well, I don't have 4 identical things. So I went to the grocery store and I just got the traditional, you know, trays that you would use for, you know, any of your holiday baking and what have you. But I split it up into each one of these trays and got it prepped and ready to go. You know, just evenly split it up so that the same amount was in each one of the trays. I used 12 pounds of extra pale Pilsner, and that was the only malt used in the beer that you all just tried, which anyone from not knowing what I did to it, you would think that it was a lot different malts that were used. But I purposefully, when I was talking with Travis about grabbing the malt from his shop, I was like, okay, well, let's go with the extra pale Pilsner malt just so that it is that much more of the strange brew kind of process behind it. But that's all the grist is 12 pounds of extra pale Pilsner malt. And I'll show you in the upcoming pictures what I mean with the interesting flavors. But it's really pretty easy, so if you want to do a interesting beer and you don't have anything other than base malt, you can. So the goal is to make them, like I said, just wet enough so that it does not burn during the baking process. I added about a half a quart to 500 milliliters per pound for each tray and make sure it was well mixed. I might actually use a little bit less water next time I try this, just because it didn't get as dark as I had hoped it would get. Like I was saying, you know, it could have gotten darker, but it still got fairly good amount of color out of it. Oops, as I click too much. So there's me mixing up the hot water. So that's the way they do is they actually heat up the water prior to, almost to boiling is what they said they did, and then they kind of let it cool down a little bit. And you mix in the water in the mash, and as you can see, each one of the trays are fairly well mixed, probably a little bit more dense than what we would do for our traditional mash for any of us doing, you know, whatever you would use for your system, but it's a lot thicker version of that. I just noticed the picture of my dog's ball in the corner there next to the mash. I just realized she was hoping I would play with her that morning. So time to bake. So I set my oven to only 350 degrees because I did not want to set off the smoke alarms. And I let it get up to that temperature for a while to make sure that it was at the right temperature. And that, like I said, traditional method is baked to 300 to 500 C, but from what I read, it caused a lot of burnt malt and smoke alarm mess. And I was doing this early in the morning, and I did not want to wake my spouse up with that fun. Sorry about that. All right. So as I loaded it in, there's the before and there's the after. So as you can see, it did get a lot of color from baking it, but I will say that it took a really long time. But the cool part was, as you can see around the edges here, I tried some of that malt and tried a couple, tastes of it. And honestly, it tasted like almost like Special B, or kind of that raisin in it, kind of raisin kind of flavor, darker crystal malt flavor that I would never have expected to get out of a beer. I got out of extra pale Pilsner malt. So that was, and then that's the after effect. That's what it looked like. And so yes, it took a full 4 hours to get the color that you see. I would definitely recommend doing this on a cooler day, so you don't heat up the whole house having the oven going at 350 for 4 hours. Also, if your significant other does not like the smell of beer being brewed, having them out of the home during this process, mine let me know multiple times that she was not pleased with me making the entire home smell like a brewery. Normally I brew in the garage, and she was not a fan of the whole house smelling like a mash. But I thought it smelled great. But that's just, personal prejudice. So this is what, as I was removing the malt from each one of the trays, then as you can see the color of the initial wort before I did the boil, and I just added a very low amount of hops just to get a little bit of balance and all that. But as you can see, the tremendous color that this beer produced, even though it is only extra pale Pilsner malt. So, yeah, not anymore. Definitely not anymore. But the fun part is that even if you only have a base malt in your home, you can make something a little strange by baking it in your oven with a little bit of water. And you can, next time I may even bump it up to 400 or 450 and see what happens, and see if I can create more of a porter style color. But this is more of what I don't know, would you say more of like an amber ale kind of flavor in? But I'm kind of interested what everybody's thoughts are on this beer. Yeah.
If you went a higher temperature on your oven, you could have reduced your time and maybe got better, measured reaction on the edges of your tin foil.
I agree. I probably should have done that, and I probably will next time I try this.
And do you think the foil itself is causing different reactions than opposed to a stainless steel thing they were using?
I think you're probably right. I think that it may have been a better reaction with an actual like baking dish, like an actual like 9x13 or something like that, and I might try that next time if I try this next year.
Next year? What are you talking about next year?
Oh, I don't know.
think you should make this for Fest this year. This would be awesome at Fest.
Yeah, I did enjoy the way this came out. It's really fun. Oh, and then I did ferment this with just English ale yeast, by the way. So I just wanted to do something fairly, not too crazy or anything like that. Oh, Kvike next time. Got it. Any other comments on this one?
Did you add water to it to get to like drain or?
Yes. So yes, it was like traditional. So that was the initial mash part. Was that, and then I did it traditional, like adding, 150 degrees or so, and did the mash for like 10, 15 minutes, basically like you would do like for a extract kind of setup, and then I removed the water from it and brought it to the boil. I did sparge.
So the Lithuanians, when they actually extract everything and they just bring it up to 175 degrees Fahrenheit and then cool it off and throw it into the fermenter?
Correct. So what they actually do too is their hops, they take a small kettle and put it over the fire, and they do an isomerization of the alpha acids and basically make like a hop paste or a tea, and then pour that into the beer. And that's why it's kind of like a raw style.
That's why you
beer.
had to boil. I see.
So that's how they get the isomerization of the hops. I'm sorry, I probably should have included that.
So, John, I'm remembering when Judith presented to all of us some ancient brewing sessions, and I think she mentioned baking for a beer. Did you look at that and consider it?
I did not notice that. I should have. But I just simply found out about this style when I watched it on Brewlosophy's YouTube channel, and I was like, "Oh, that's cool. I want to try that."
Well, it is way cool. Nice job.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, I thought this was unusual yet perfect for strange brews. But thank you so much. So moving on. Oh no, we got more.
Lauren has suggested baking it in Dutch ovens.
That would probably be really good. Doing it in Dutch oven
instead of aluminum.
Yeah, it would save the aluminum, and it would probably create even of a better baked, kind of a caramelization. Good idea. I like that. I might try that. I'm going to probably do it raw next time as well, where I will do the hops in a small little pot as separate from the rest of the thing. All right. Cool. So moving on to the next strange brew that I made. It's called Double Date. So I don't know if you all have done this before, but I wanted to use a non-conventional sugar that would bring out the flavor complexity of a Belgian double. Has anybody here brewed with date syrup? Obviously Stan has, because Stan says, "Can I ferment that?" I remember Stan's presentation on I can ferment that. So that's the non-conventional version of it. So I'm going to have, hang on a second. Somebody want to start bringing this around? I brought a lot of this one. So this is the Belgian double that I made with using date syrup. So date syrup is made specifically by pressing dates together, extracting the majority of the water from the finished product, creating a very nutrient-rich and a very sweet syrup. So something else that I learned is that, I don't know if any of you have had date sugar, but date sugar can be a little bit problemsome to work with brewing. because date sugar tends to have a lot more of the fibrous material in it, and makes it kind of difficult with beverages. Well, the syrup kind of gets rid of a lot of that stuff, and it actually creates this amazing flavored product that's really, really helpful, and it works well. So just for reference points, 1 tablespoon of date syrup contains about 13 grams of sugar, whereas 1 tablespoon of granulated sugar contains 15 grams of sugar. So it's actually very, very close as far as sugar and date syrup. They actually work very, very well together, and it definitely gives out a lot of similar flavors and complexities. So this is my grist for this one. It was 10 pounds of Golden Promise, and then 12 ounces of aromatic, 8 ounces of Caramunic, and 8 ounces of Special B. And then I threw in about 18 ounces of date syrup. So and then I also used WLP's 540, so their Abbey Ale yeast for this one. So this is the date syrup that I use. This is called the Date Lady syrup. Apparently it's fairly common. You can see it, it's all over the place. But something I learned that's kind of interesting about this product is that it has a lot of the nutrients that you get in your yeast nutrients. So your yeast nutrients that you put into helping out your yeast kind of grow, it has, you can see it's got the manganese, it's got potassium, it's got riboflavin, it's got all sorts of all those micronutrients that we would get in our yeast nutrients actually already exists in date syrup. So I noticed there was quite a vigorous fermentation. I found out later after the fact that it's due to the fact that it was because this date syrup has all these great micronutrients that works really, really well in a beer. So it was kind of a happy accident, more or less. But I feel like it's a great replacement for amber or dark Belgian candy syrup, and it's very close in sugar content, so you can almost do 1 for 1 as far as, converting one for the other if you're trying to basically figure out how much alcohol or how much sugar you're putting into your beer. My plan definitely is to utilize date syrup in the future in probably a lager of some sort, just because I really want to really present the date syrup, let it punch through. But I really think this was kind of an interesting, strange kind of fermentation option. Besides Stan, it doesn't seem like too many people have used it here because, he did the whole I can ferment that. So, but I feel like it's a really, really fun ingredient that creates a really interesting flavor profile. Anybody's thoughts, questions on the double date? Yes, Stan.
Of course. So the first time I tried using dates in a beer, I ground up some actual dates, and added it to the mash. What a horrible mistake. A horrible, horrible mistake. So if you grind up dates and you add them to your mash, it will glue the mash into a solid, non-permeable substance. You will not be able to get any liquid to go through that mash, I guarantee. So date syrup is the way to go. And the other thing that gets underappreciated love is palm sugar, which is made from date palms. So I think maybe somebody should make a beer that has date syrup and palm sugar and bring it to Fest. We need to have a lot of really interesting beers at Fest so that we stand out from the other homebrew clubs.
Okay.
I have to ask Stan if he's going to Fest.
I have a feeling Stan's going to Fest.
Stan is going to Fest.
Excellent.
And Stan is camping with the engineers because they are more fun to camp with than Quaff. And they're more fun to camp with. And I'm going on Thursday. Thursday is awesome.
Excellent. Andy.
You know, one of the things that maybe wasn't pointed out to everybody in this club, but you know, we do this at the festival. There's a bragging rights competition, and every year they have a different style. Thank you. Every year they have a different style. This year the style is experimental. Ooh. So you know, I think Strange Brews, Stan's challenge, all of these things you guys should be thinking about now. Can I make some experimental or maybe strange brews that you want to make for the festival? These things will end up having a competition with our new competition czar before the festival to pick. We can only pick. Well, we can pick two because we have two clubs here, but we can only pick two to represent our clubs for the competition. So think about it: strange brews, experimental brews.
All right. Well, thank you for that one. Now the next one, to totally change gears. Anybody have anything else on Double Date? I feel like that was kind of a fun Belgian kind of craziness. So the next one, to totally change gears, we're going to do the Oops All Berries Berliner Weiss. This is when things get weird. And you know what I mean by weird? Strange. They get extra strange. Okay, because I used Captain Crunch Oops All Berries. And I'm not even kidding. Okay. And I used a non-traditional souring method as well, so, figured let's go weird. Okay, so this was a very, very basic Berliner Weiss, 3 pounds of white wheat, 4 pounds of Pilsner malt. That was all that I used, okay? Very, very basic Berliner Weiss beer, but I did not account for how much sugar is in Captain Crunch berries. So it does have a little bit higher alcohol than your traditional Berliner Weiss, but it's still fun. So yes, this is how my brew day started, with Captain Crunch Oops All Berries, the large size. So I used two large boxes of Captain Crunch Oops All Berries. Let me start getting this passed around, because this one is wild. Sam, do you mind? Yes, please. So I started off with a traditional mash, but I did just, if you ever brew beer with cereal, if it's corn-based like Captain Crunch berries, you may or may not need to use rice hulls. But if it is grain-based, like I discovered, you do need to use rice hulls, because you will have a stuck mash. Travis knows because one of the beers I didn't have tonight, because I just did 4, I got a stuck mash, and I'll be bringing it to next meeting, but I did a crumble cookie milk stout, so that one's a fun one too. That'll be next meeting I'll bring for everybody to try. But so looks like a normal beer, normal what have you, but then that's when things got weird.
It looks like a clown exploded.
It does look like a clown exploded. It does look like a clown literally ate a grenade, but so please have as much of this as you like. I brought 2 full growlers, but this one's kind of wild. But this beer, honestly, I was getting nervous because it looked like this, and then it turned into this gray looking wart, and I was like, oh crap. Well, this was just a wasted batch, because I thought this one was going to be one I was going to have to pitch. I genuinely thought I was going to have to pitch this beverage, but it turned out pretty nice. So that's what it went from that to that, and then this is when I got really worried. So I soured this with Good Belly probiotics, and yes, in Strange Brews fashion, I dumped the whole bottle in, because why not? I added a whole quart of Good Belly, and I was able to set my electronic setup to 1% power at 5,500 watts, and that left me right at about 102 degrees Fahrenheit, which was perfect. And I left it there for 48 hours, and it created quite a sour product. But as you can see by the hydrometer there, I was expecting this to be at 1036, and it came out at right at 1050 because the Captain's Crunch berries added quite a bit of sugar to it. So oops is right. So it definitely came out a little bit higher than I was expecting, but that was what was worrying me more so, is that was what it was looking like. I was like, it's green. This is not a St. Patty's Day beverage. I don't know what to do with this thing. Hopefully this doesn't taste like a foot. So that's where the strangeness came in. And then, as you can see, it cleared up and settled out, and it looks more like a normal beer. But I will say, though, when I transferred this to the keg and poured my first glass, it was green like that again because it had settled out in my keezer, and I was like, oh, crap. Oh, well, I guess it's not clear anymore. But after about a pint, it cleared up just fine, as you can see, and it created quite a punch as far as tartness goes from the Good Belly. And so that's what it turned out to look like. And things I learned when doing this was the sugar content is way higher than I thought in breakfast cereal. So be forewarned when utilizing breakfast cereal. Besides, the increased rate of diabetes, which we are all very, just know that when you add cereal to a beer, it's going to be a little bit higher, starting gravity than you expected. And then it's supposed to be 1036, and it was at 1048, 1050. So it added quite a bit. Rice hulls were something like, when using something like a breakfast cereal. So yeah, I highly recommend, if you ever decide to make a beer with breakfast cereal, use rice hulls. Just make life easier on yourself. Travis has got plenty of them at his shop. But what are your thoughts on Oops All Berries Berliner Weiss?
Stan's got a question.
Stan's got a question. Shocker.
Of course. So this one goes on the sour beer side.
Yes. Sour beer side? Yep.
This tastes like nondescript fruity yogurt beer.
I like it. But there's no lactose in it.
You had, because you're using a commercial product, I would have been worried about all the preservatives in the cereal itself affecting your fermentation. Did you have any effect on initial fermentation?
No, this thing was rocking and rolling. I pitched a packet of California dry ale yeast from Cellar Science, and less than 12 hours there was already airlock activity. So it had no effect whatsoever on fermentation or anything like that from the preservatives, even though red dye 40 and whatever else, yellow number, whatever.
BHA and all the other, the manganese.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, what was my other thought? I forgot it. Sorry.
It's okay. But yes, none of the preservatives actually impacted the fermentation, and it worked quite well, and it finished right at 1008. Any other questions? Definitely on the end of strange brews. This is definitely one of the more stranger beers I've ever produced, but I hope everybody liked it. I thought it was kind of interesting, but different. So the next beer is kind of a pseudo strange brews, but I feel like it turned out pretty nice, so I wanted to share it with the club. And that was the Be My Cherry Pie, because this was kind of inspired by when we went out to Chad's farm and picked all the berries. I brought home a quart-sized bag of the amazing cherries from his farm, but has anybody here used Appalachian Tart from White Labs? I've used it a couple times, and it is a fun and unique kind of weird yeast that worked perfectly for strange brews. So what it is it's a mixture of lacto and Kvike yeast into one. So you could probably produce this yourself if you wanted to with, at home if you co-pitched both some sort of Kvike yeast with lacto, but I don't know, to be honest with you, what type of lacto and what type of Kvike yeast that they used, because it's kind of like proprietary whatever. I went on White Lab's website. Believe it or not, it was actually down for a while when I was trying to find out information. Their whole website crashed for a bit. But this is, honestly, I had this fermenting. It definitely does well in the warmer temperature range because of the Kvike side of it. And it actually did really, really well. And if this next slide, believe it or not, is actually been viewed like over 5,000 times for Travis's website or for his reviews on Google. I actually posted this for his shop talking about the Appalachian Tart, because this is the beverage that I pitched the yeast in, and it did quite well. So put these around. If I could have a couple people help me. So this beer started off as a traditional pitched, mixed fermentation, and then when we went and did Chad's thing, I decided, what the heck, might as well add it to this beverage. But what I did with this beer was I actually added Chad's cherries to it, and I actually threw a heat belt around it so I could get it up to a high enough temperature. And so this beer actually sat, it was more so I was busy with working a lot and I was busy with other stuff, and this beer sat on the cherries for 3 months. I didn't mean to have it sit on the cherries for that long, but it was a lower amount than what Andy recommended. So I was worried that based upon, the fruiting basis, but I was like, well, I only brought back a quart-sized bag of the cherries from Chad's farm, so I wasn't sure if the flavor would come out, so I let it sit for longer. Andy says 3 months is good, so cool. So, but this one I really feel like it really turned out nice. I feel like the flavor really pops, but it's not as in-your-face tart as a lot of the other sour beers. It's kind of a softer tartness, but it really does have a good cherry hit. And the fun part about this is that it carbonates in the bottle really, really quickly because the Kvike yeast. So I was wondering if it would kick off well, and it carbonated pretty nicely in the bottle, and it really, really. And if you want more of this, I brought 3 bottles of it, so please grab some more of it. But that is more or less my cherry pie, because I feel like it really does taste like a tart cherry pie with the breadiness and with everything else. But it's worked in the strange brew kind of realm because it is a sour beer, but it's a mixed fermentation of both Kvike yeast and lacto yeast, and I feel like it really, really brought out a lot of interesting flavors. But any questions or thoughts on this beverage? The ABV is about 6.3. Oh, apparently Stan said this is another one I have to bring to Fest. Stan wants to brew with me with Fest. Sounds good. That works. All right. Travis had a question? Oh, yes. So I should have included the grain bill. So this grain bill was fairly simple. It was Pilsner with a little bit of Special B and a little bit of Crystal 20. So it was pretty basic, but I really feel like the fun part about that yeast is I made an IPA with the same yeast, and it really did an interesting version of it. So it's kind of fun. You can do all kinds of weird stuff with this yeast, and it's a vault strain, so it comes out between March and June every year. So, yes, Ryan.
What happened to the green beer?
The green beer turned into the clear beer.
Oh, it did?
Yes.
John showed a picture back at our last meeting of this green beer that looked like he put grass clippings in it.
That is the beer that turned out clear.
I was looking forward to a green beer, and I didn't get one, so I'm disappointed.
I should have saved the green part just for you, Ryan.
I guess you should have.
So the date one was fairly tart. Was there anything that specifically made that tart?
No,
Okay.
other than it could have been just the date syrup.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. Like, and your stop mash didn't last for 48 hours or anything.
No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, it had an interesting sourness to it.
Honestly, I think that might be just the date syrup creating weird and kind of interesting flavors in all the beverages. Any other questions? Stan's got more questions. Oh, no. I think Stan's going to bug me every time now.
Yeah, this is not a question. It was a kind of a response to Chris. I've done the double date before. And it didn't finish as tart as yours did. It finished a little sweeter.
Okay.
A little sweeter. So I don't know if the yeast strain or fermentation temperature, but it finished a little sweeter. And I do have a bottle of date syrup. I had intended last year to do a Belgian blonde and then use the yeast cake to do a double date. But I haven't done it yet, so maybe this year.
There you go.
Yeah.
Fest. So thank you so much. And like I said, keep your brews strange. The idea was to kind of make this lighthearted and fun, and also to try to get out of here in time for us to have a little bit of social time before they kicked us out of here, because I was told that, they're closing it earlier than we normally leave here, so I didn't want to make sure we were in here too late. But any other questions about what I covered? Awesome. Well, thank you for enjoying all these beverages.